Alrighty, chat. Let's get started. Welcome to another HealthyGamerGG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I am a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational or entertainment purposes only. If y'all have a concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy June, everybody. Yeah. We've got an awesome interview today. We're going to be talking with Mr. Cat about LGBTQIA struggles. So we're going to hop into that in just 1 second. But I just wanted to see how everybody's doing. Yeah, so as you guys noticed, we've got mods that will... Uh-oh. Did the thing... Okay, well... How are y'all doing? First live? Okay, welcome, Soldier. Happy Friday, yes. Happy Pride Month, everybody. Absolutely. Yeah. We can ask Mr. Cat what LGBTQIA stands for. Good. Y'all are good? Well, I'm hyped too. Should we just hop right in? So anything that you guys want to talk about, or let's interview? Let's go. I'm feeling like going. Like, I'm feeling like enough preamble. Let's do what we came here to do, chat. Let's understand a little bit about the experiences of people in the LGBTQIA space. Because that's what we do here. We want to understand what people's lives are like, right? And we try to be non-judgmental. Or if we're going to be judgmental, which I know is kind of weird, we want to be judgmental with compassion, which I know may be confusing for people. So let's go ahead and hop in. Ready? Let's do it, chat. Chat lords. Hello. Can you just count to 10 for me? Count to 10 for me? Okay, awesome. Try one more time.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay,
7.
Awesome. I'm going to just turn you up a little bit. Try now. Oh.
1, 2, 3, 4,
okay,
5.
Awesome.
6.
That's great. I just need to change one other thing because for some reason, this thinks that you are the Surgeon General of the United States. We just got to fix that real quick. Oh, well,
was that unclear?
Yeah, I think that explains so much.
That makes sense.
I'm going to have to add some spaces.
Also, thank you, chat, for helping me count to 10. I forgot a couple numbers in there.
Yeah, we're going to be learning all kinds of stuff today.
Oh, perfect.
Like how to count maybe past 10.
I've never gotten that far.
That's this is what we do here. We push the boundaries and learn new stuff. So this is so cool. I did yeah, so can you start by telling us what you prefer to be called?
Sure. So my name is Misty.
Uh-huh.
I am a Minecraft YouTuber. My pronouns are she, they.
Uh-huh.
So just anything that's not he, pretty much. My identity is an androsexual demigirl, which essentially just means I'm non-binary, but I like guys. And there's just specific terminology for that.
Okay. So is there anything in particular we're talking about today?
I jotted down a couple notes, but just in general, why I'm here is I saw you guys made a channel post saying you were looking for people to talk to.
Absolutely.
And I thought, since it's Pride Month, why not volunteer myself?
Thank you very much for doing that.
Yeah, of course. People got in touch, and here I am. But mainly, I've watched a lot of your videos for a couple of years now. But as someone that struggled with LGBT issues, I noticed you didn't have too many videos like that on here.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to try and help you get something going for that community, because I'd always liked your videos, but you never had the specific stuff I was after. So maybe I can help some people out today. We'll see.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Misty, I really, really, really appreciate that. And I think that you highlighted a couple of really important things. So a lot of times, the quote unquote videos that we make are based on the people that we talk to. And our goal here is to understand the lived experience of different people on the earth.
Yeah.
And so I'm really grateful for you being here today. And is there anything in particular about, so I can ask a bunch of questions, but is there a particular place that, or particular things that you were hoping to share today?
Sure. So some things I just thought of leading up to this is that for creators specifically, there's a lot of fear of coming out as a creator, which is something I did just a couple weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. There's a lot of misgendering issues in the space, which can be difficult to deal with, which I'm still not positive, but maybe we can work through that. There's a lot of just harassment in general, which obviously, of course. So like one thing is I don't necessarily my face isn't like hidden. I've revealed my face before. It's not like I need some big face reveal, but typically it's just better just to use like an avatar like this just to not get harassment, even if like you are perfectly like normal, attractive, whatever. Just there's a lot of stuff behind just how much people hate that stuff. And then the last thing I had was that I actually have been swatted because of my identity, which was something we could talk about.
Oh my God, that sounds terrible.
A little bit.
So, Misty, the first thing that I just kind of want to notice is that I'm hearing that in addition to all of the normal difficulties of life, like getting out of bed and eating healthy and finding motivation and trying to figure out what you're doing with your life, you have a layer of additional challenges. That sounds like really tough.
It can be. From my perspective, though, I think I genuinely have like a really lucky and good life. And the way I see it is that if this is the only thing I struggle with, my life's amazing compared to other people. But I do understand it is a very deep issue, and it is something I've definitely struggled with, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So can we just start by, can you please explain to us some of like the terminology?
Sure.
So can you start by telling us what LGBTQIA plus means?
Sure. So it stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, I think intersex, and then I don't know what the A is. Something that I've learned about, I just call it like pride or queer or whatever in general, is that it's evolving so much so quickly that I don't think any queer person I know fully knows what all of the terms mean, because there's so much coming out, so many people are exploring it. It's kind of just, you learn something new, you look it up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so this is something that I've always wondered. How do we decide which letters to include and which ones to not include?
I have no idea personally. I've also wondered this. That's why I just say like pride or like queer people, just because it's kind of like a blanket term and people get what you're talking about.
Okay. And you mentioned that you are an
So how the gender spectrum works is it's kind of like a slider between male to female. Well, where non-binary is anything that's not on either end of the spectrum. But then it also kind of goes down a little bit into like agender or like mixed gender or whatever. So demigirl means I'm non-binary, but slightly on the feminine side. So I'm kind of in the middle between male and female, but slightly on the feminine side, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
then androsexual. It gets weird saying if you're straight or gay when you're talking about non-binary people. So that just means no matter what your gender is, you like guys, if that makes sense.
Okay. Okay. So you're physically. So I see that in the way that you describe yourself, there is a component of what your identity is and what you
Mhm.
are attracted to,
Yeah.
and that those two things are actually like somewhat independent.
Yeah.
Can you help us understand that a little bit?
In which ways?
So I'm just kind of thinking of people who are not very familiar with some of these terminologies or experiences of life. And so even as you kind of mentioned, androsexual like solves a problem, right? Because if you're gay or homosexual, that implies that you are attracted to the same gender that you identify as, right?
Correct. Hmm.
And so the challenge though is that being attracted to the same gender, if your gender is non-binary or fluid, like, so you know, what does it mean to be a homosexual demigirl? Does it mean that you are attracted to other demigirls or what? And so I was just kind of like alluding to the idea that like gay and straight are kind of, those terms are couched in binary genders.
Hmm.
But I guess
Yeah.
I kind of explained it.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think a lot of it's just kind of person to person. Like a lot of people who are like a male who like a female might still say they're gay just because it like fits with how they feel, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. So can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and what kind of growing up was like for you?
Sure. So, I come from an extremely religious household. I am religious myself. Um, I recently came out a week ago, as androsexual demigirl online, although I just told my family I'm gay because it's close enough. They don't know what any of that means. And in general, I've known about my sexuality for about 9 years. My gender I've been figuring it out for a couple years. But typically, oh, I should say that coming out to my family did go well. It all went super nice. Everyone's happy, etc. There were no issues, any of that kind of stuff. But I had been afraid of there being issues for a very long time. Because again, my family is religious, and that's typically something that doesn't go over very well in that kind of situation. So it definitely took me a long time, a lot of courage to finally build it up. But once I did, it was like a big relief. I could finally start being myself for the first time in forever, over half my life. I had to date people in secret. I had to like not talk about anything like relating to LGBT stuff in case they would like get a hint or something. It
Hmm.
was very anxiety filled, if that makes sense.
So it sounds
It
like you
kind
were
of
hiding.
Yeah. The way I've described it before is it kind of feels like you're in like that old like spy movie where like, oh, you're like the Russian spy and they're trying to figure out and you can't leave any traces.
Yeah, so what's it like to grow up and kind of be a spy in your own life?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't horrible. It's just mainly you just can't really do anything. Like I couldn't use any dating apps for fear that someone would find it and show a family member. Or like if I did a live stream, I couldn't comment on like someone I thought was attractive because maybe one of my family members' kids is watching and they'll tell and that'll go all up escalated
Hmm.
or just any of that kind of stuff. Like if I had a boyfriend, I couldn't like have him around or like meet my family. We'd have to like go out somewhere in secret and then be back before a certain time or whatever.
And do you remember what kind of like, so I'm sort of seeing that you're planning your life around preventing information getting out. Is that fair to say?
I can agree, yeah. It definitely feels like what I've done.
Yeah, so I mean, what kind of scenarios were you envisioning, like when you would do those kinds of things, right? Like, let's say using a dating app. Like,
Mhm.
what was going on in your head about like what would happen?
Uh, in my head, so I just couldn't use dating apps because it's kind of like a built-in paranoia, if that makes sense. But essentially, like I would just envision like, oh, someone's scrolling through Tinder and then they see me and they see that I'm looking for men and then they show someone they know and then that person knows a family member. Because I have a very large family in a very small area,
Hmm.
and so there's like a lot of people that it could actually get to, if
And
that makes sense.
yeah, it does. So I'm kind of curious, like, what did you have, like, kind of thoughts about what would happen if someone did see?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I would just assume that it would go over a lot worse if they found out from someone else where I wasn't even prepared to talk about it, rather than me to be prepared and tell them individually myself,
Mm-hmm.
which is definitely what I think you should do. So how I came out was I just worked up person to person from like the most important people in my life to just like my general family. Not as if they're not important, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And just individually talking through, tell them, hey, this is what's going on, etc. Whereas if they just found out from like their little cousin who had a phone and looked at a website, I feel like that wouldn't go over well.
Yeah. So, like, what kind? So, what I'm sort of imagining, Misty, is that there may be lots of people out there who are listening to this conversation and will listen to this conversation in the future.
Hmm.
And I think we talk about, in a general sense, like coming out. But I think that my experience, at least as a mental health professional, like working with people around this stuff, is that there's like, we just use two words, coming out, and it's
Hmm.
kind of binary. But
Yep.
my experience is that there's actually like a whole pile of thoughts, fears, behaviors that can like grow over the course of years. And in your case, it
Hmm.
sounds like you've been sort of exploring this for like at least a decade or about a decade.
Hmm.
And so what I was hoping to do is understand, a little bit more color about your experience, because I imagine that there are going to be people who can relate to those details.
Yeah, okay, I get that. So one thing that actually helped me was since I've been a growing content creator, I got a bunch of opportunities in June this year for Pride Month,
Mm-hmm.
such as YouTube wanted to feature me on their channel. I got invited to a big Pride Minecraft tournament, etc. And this was all happening like the very beginning of June. So what pushed me to come out was all this happening, and my family is like into like my YouTube stuff. They watch all my videos and etc. So I went to them and said, "Hey, just so you know, I got these amazing opportunities. You're gonna see this. I just wanted to let you know beforehand to hear it from me and not from them." Because I think one of the biggest things you can do when coming out is let them know that you do respect how they feel.
Hmm.
So if you say like, I understand you may not understand what I'm doing, you may not like it. It might not make you happy, but I don't want to hurt you. I just want you to know that this is what makes me happy, and let me know if there's anything I can do to like help you along this process or etc. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm noticing already that the way that you came out was not antagonistic,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think
and
that's very important.
respecting their beliefs, because
Hmm.
I know a lot of people will sort of consider some beliefs backwards and whatnot, but I'm not hearing you really do that.
Hmm. So like my grandma is probably the most religious person, so I made sure that when I came out to her, I was like, I still like love God. I'm like will probably still go to church now and then. Like it doesn't affect any of that. This is just who I am, and I understand it's not fully in line with your stuff, but I hope you can learn to accept me because I am not gonna let it like change who I am. This is just a fact, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Is it? Do you feel comfortable if I ask you a little bit more detail about your family's reactions?
Of course.
So, like, what did your grandma say?
Well, she was like kind of crying, but it went very well. She was like, "I understand. Thank you for telling me that. I still love you. I'll always love you. Just you're always welcome in my house. Make sure if you ever need anything, call me."
Wow.
It went pretty quick, which that was way better than I expected. Yeah.
What were
And
you afraid was going to happen?
I was afraid to like start like really crying. So like, oh no, you're going to hell, blah blah blah. But I mean, maybe that will be for some people. It could be very case to case. But according to my grandparents, that when I both talked to both of them, they were kind of just like not too surprised.
Hmm.
Because again, I had known for over about 9 years that I'm some kind of queer, and so I have been slowly like dropping hints, like have painted my nails and stuff like that, and they were kind of like, yeah, there were the signs. So I think
Well,
it does help that I kind of eased them into it, if that makes sense.
and so what were some of the other signs that they had sort of picked up on?
I think I am kind of flamboyant. My voice has gotten higher pitched over time. I've had no interest in women for a decade, or kind of ever, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and
What
how
else?
does your voice get higher pitched over time?
So a lot of my YouTube stuff is vocal training, and I do a lot of voice acting. So I've
Interesting.
just like done a lot of training and tried to get to a voice that I feel is more suitable for me, if that makes sense.
Sure. And what do you mean by flamboyant? What does that look like?
I feel like I haven't really noticed it myself, but like my friends have told me I do like the gay hand gestures or something, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I have certain stereotypes in my mind, but
Yeah, no, I get it.
um, okay, so I guess some of your mannerisms are not, I guess, what we could call traditionally masculine. Is that fair to say?
I can agree.
Yeah, and so your voice changes somewhat. You also kind of will paint your nails, which as I understand, I'm joining the boomer generation very quickly, but
hmm
I understand that painting nails is not even like related to being queer in any way now. Is that fair to say?
No,
Okay,
I mean it is to them probably because
right.
no one else they know does it. But...
And so that sounds really fantastic,
Thank you.
Misty. I think and I may accidentally misgender you, for which I apologize, but I'm going to do
No,
my
I
best.
understand.
But that sounds fantastic that that it sounds like you respect your family a lot. Your family respects you a lot. And that the
hmm
coming out process was sort of, if I can kind of summarize, was like, first of all, not, so you started out as a spy, but then you
Yeah.
started dropping hints, or maybe not dropping hints so much as like restrain your paranoia a little bit.
hmm
So I'm kind of curious about that. Like when you decided to paint your nails, what was going on in your head and like what did you think could happen?
Well, everything I've done, I've had like an excuse for. So the reason I started painting my nails was it was the year my YouTube channel started blowing up,
Hmm.
and for Halloween I cosplayed my character. And so you see, I have like the green and orange eyes. That's like a big part of my brand. I made my right hand green nails and my left hand orange nails for the
Hmm.
costume. And then they were like, "Oh, that's funny. You did your nails for your costume." And then I just kept doing it, and they kind of like didn't realize. And then they're like, "Oh, I guess this is just a thing now." So just kind of again easing people into it has made it a lot easier for me, at least.
Yeah, so I mean it's so interesting how how much you have to calculate.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be me. I don't know, but that's kind of how I see most situations.
Yeah, so okay, so you're kind of easing them into it and then it sounds like you mentioned that like working up the courage. Can you help us understand what that looks like or how that like how does one do that?
That's a great question because it took me so long. But it's kind of I don't think anyone really just like snaps their fingers and comes out. I don't think that's how it works. So like my friends, like my close friends, have known since I did about all this. I've always kept them updated. My mom's kind of known for about 8 years. I kind of waited a little bit to tell her, but eventually talked to her. She understood. And then like as people came into my life, the more I like trusted them outside my family, I would tell them until eventually I got this big opportunity and used that to come out. But sorry, you go.
So your mom has known that you're androsexual, but did you refer to it as androsexual 8 years ago?
I just referred to it as gay because I
Okay.
didn't know what my gender was.
And what was that? Can you tell us a little bit about what that conversation looked like or how you worked up to it?
I can think, but again, it's been like 8 years. So,
Yeah, I know.
um, It was just kind of like a, hey, I need to have a serious talk with you. I've been feeling like this for a while. She also wasn't surprised back then. She had kind of a similar reaction to my grandma, like, just no, this doesn't change anything, still love you, etc.
Okay. And I'm kind of noticing that, like, a big part of how you pitch it is that, so oftentimes I think families who don't understand will sort of think of you as one kind of person. And so when you come out to them, you become a different person.
I agree.
And they sort of try to hold on to their old impression of you. And like, that's the real you, Misty. And maybe you're sick or something like that. And so if we like help you enough, you can return back to the quote unquote real you. One thing that I noticed in your language, which I think is actually really, really cool, is that you say, this is who I am. This is who I've always been. And so it's sort of like owning, like, I am this. And I don't know how else to describe it, but I think there's just a lot of, because when I think about people coming out and sort of explaining issues of gender identity or sexual attraction that are not heteronormative, like, it's kind of weird, right? Because we have like guides or like videos or resources of like how to make a resume and how to like go on a job interview. But no one ever tells us like, this is how you come out to your family.
Yeah.
And so that's what I really appreciate about everything you're kind of sharing and why I'm asking for details.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate you asking, because I would have loved this video like 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, and so that's why we're doing it, right? So we're 2 or 3 years too late, but hopefully not too late for everyone who's watching. Were there other things? So you mentioned kind of working up the courage. So it sounds like you started disclosing some information about yourself like years ago. So are there other things that you can share with us about this kind of working up the courage?
Well, I think one of the best things you can do is during college, they had like a counseling service you could go to for free as like part of the tuition. And so I was going there specifically to like an LGBT counselor, and she was helping me walk through stuff and work up courage. And that was kind of a good thing. I feel like since there is such a lack of information, I think just finding an expert on the topic, if you can afford it, sadly, a lot of people can't afford it, can help you a bunch. Like, I have a counselor I saw a couple weeks ago for when I was coming out, and she helped me a ton with how to go about everything, the process, like working on like a script I could use for each person. That kind of
Wow.
stuff.
So you guys like literally like thought about a script and worked through a script. What, if it's okay, if you feel comfortable sharing, what were some of the other things? What does working on look like or mean?
Just kind of like letting, because you know how I said it was going to be very like fearful, and like I was afraid my family would be like upset or maybe angry or whatever. She mainly kept me working on like, it will be okay even if it goes wrong. It's not the end of the world. Like, regardless, your family will still love you, etc. Like, just kind of a reassurance that like you can do it. It's okay. It's not going to be as big of a deal as you think it is. And she was right about everything she told me. So.
Yeah, and do you have a sense of where your counselor's confidence came from?
Just telling her about my family, because we talked a couple times. She's like, "So you want to come out to your grandpa? Tell me what he's like or how he feels." And then I tell her that, and then she's like, "Okay, I think he'll be perfectly fine. I think, etc."
Mysticat, can I think for a second?
Sure.
Any questions for me?
I think my only question for you would be if you had questions for me.
I have more questions. I have a ton of questions for you.
Okay, perfect.
I was just kind of jotting down because like I was kind of saying, no one teaches us how to come out. And oftentimes, like it's so, to the public, it's so binary, right? Like you've come out and then it's kind of like done. But what I'm sort of really appreciating about hearing your story is that it's like one hell of a process. It's anything but binary.
Mm-hmm.
Even in terms of like self-determination and figuring out who you are and what you're attracted to in the way that you talk to people. And I think that like, I think hearing kind of the pieces, and I may try to summarize towards the end and kind of run by you what I've actually ended up hearing. And almost like, I wonder if by the end of this call, we can have like a 10-minute how-to on how to come out. Because that I think could
maybe
be incredibly helpful for people. What do you think?
I do think it's extremely case by case, and everybody has their own best way to do it. But I still think like a general guidelines can't hurt.
Absolutely. So the next question that I've got for you is how did you know that you're androsexual?
I've just never liked girls, and I've always liked guys. So even as a kid, I had, I think, like 5 girlfriends up to middle school. But the only reason I had girlfriends is because I watched cartoons, and the main character wants a girlfriend, and then he's cool. And so I thought, oh, I need a girlfriend, and then I'll be cool. And like, that's just kind of how it works. But
Wait.
I was never really interested in them.
Hold on, you had 5 girlfriends up until middle school?
Mm-hmm.
So you were like a mega Chad bro in elementary school?
I guess you could say that, yeah.
So that's really interesting. So as a scientist, I wonder actually how common that is. I wonder if prepubescent romantic relationships with women is actually like, I wonder if that correlates with being androsexual.
It could be interesting. I don't know.
Okay, so you had and how what was that like? Like, how do you even get a girlfriend in like the 3rd grade or 4th grade?
I think you're just kind of like, hey, you want to be my girlfriend? And they're like, sure. And then you like sit at lunch together.
That's so interesting because I this is hilarious, but I'm sort of like thinking about my own experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how like if you're actually a heterosexual man, asking a girl out is very terrifying. And I wonder if the lack of sexual attraction or romantic interest actually makes it so much more easier or casual.
I think you might be 100% right. I've never thought about that, but it definitely feels like that makes sense.
So when you were like in elementary school, what was your relationship with boys like?
Just kind of normal.
Okay, so you had like friends and stuff. It's not like you were so you had girlfriends, but it's not like most of your friends were women.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened in middle school? What was that like?
Well, I'd already been questioning before, like a lot of the time, like I'd see like a cartoon character or someone that I'd like really like or something, and then I think I watched Wizards of Waverly Place, and there was a character named Justin Russo, and I'd always thought he was super cute, and I just never really put it into words because that wasn't in my mind. That was something I could think, and then eventually around high school sometime, I was with some of my friends. I don't remember the conversation, but I found out that it's not normal to like find in terms of like heterosexuality to find men attractive. And so we were like in the car, and I said like, isn't it weird how like sometimes you just find guys attractive? And they're like, no. And I was like, wait, is this what? And that's when I started exploring it a little more.
I once worked with someone who was a heterosexual man who said that they had a penis fetish. They're like, I'm not gay. I just have a fetish for penises.
It's kind of funny.
And I was like, okay. I was not quite sure how to interpret that, but I was like, bro, you might be gay. He's like, nah, man. I just have a fetish for penises. It's like, they just turn me on. And I'm like, what do you think the definition of gay is?
Can't blame him.
I still don't know. I mean, it's possible he was bisexual. He was, not too interested in self-exploration, and he found a what can we say? He found a explanation that worked for him. So even to this day, I try really hard to not be judgmental, but I kind of noticed that like I'm being judgmental about it. But anyway. Okay, so it sounds like you just sort of thought boys were cute, and I mean in terms of like, so it sounds like you also just didn't find girls attractive, or you did, or what?
I've never found women attractive. No.
Okay.
If I do, it's because I like imagine myself like in their position with like a hot guy or something.
Um, so that's actually. Is it okay if we talk a little bit more about more sexual details? Like, I'm not going to go into tons of sexual
Yeah,
details,
of
but
course.
that sort of thing.
Hmm.
So this is also something I've seen a lot. So can you explain what you mean by imagine myself at basically in the girl's position when you're thinking about sexual stuff, right?
Hmm.
So you like, maybe I'll just go ahead and explain it because I don't know how to tactfully ask you questions about this
Sure.
while respecting boundaries. But this is also something that I've seen a fair amount when I work with people who have issues of or exploring, maybe is a better way to put it,
Hmm.
issues of gender identity or sexuality. Is like I'll ask actually a set of questions, which
Hmm.
is the first question that I ask when trying to help people figure out if they are gay or bisexual or whatever is what do you get horny about? Really, really simple question. Another really good question that I found is just very, very helpful. This, like, by the way, like we could sort of figure out within 5 minutes whether someone is or is not. Your mileage may vary, but I actually
Hmm.
find that we are so shy in the way that we ask questions that we actually like don't help people figure things out.
I get what you mean.
So the first thing that I'll ask is, what do you get horny about? Second thing I'll ask is, oftentimes people watch pornography, and if they watch pornography, what kind of pornography do you watch? And then a
Hmm.
really, really eye-opening question, which I think you alluded to, is even if you watch heterosexual porn, which person do you identify with? Which
Yeah, that makes
often,
sense.
oftentimes is very, very like eye-opening for people.
Hmm.
And usually with those three questions, like we kind of figure it out if the relationship is strong enough and they can be honest with themselves. And that's kind of how you figure out. So you mentioned you kind of imagined yourself as the woman in sexual scenarios. And then are there
Yeah.
other kinds of things that sort of helped you figure out that you were androsexual?
Um. Well, I'm not too sure because it is kind of like what you said. So, like I do just in those videos, I pick specifically the women or whatever, and I do, of course, occasionally watch pornography. I'm probably not gonna like give you like the link to one, but
Yeah,
in
no,
general,
I get that.
yeah,
That's why I
um,
just decided to say my piece instead of ask you
yeah,
questions
yeah, yeah.
because,
I get what you mean. Um,
But the reason I ask is because I think imagining yourself as the woman is actually something like really, really critical that no one talks about. And just about every non-heterosexual or imagining yourself as the gender that you don't identify with is one of
mhm.
like the most eye-opening moments that I've seen with tons of people. So I'm looking if there's any other nuggets like that you've got, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, and I totally agree. But I'm not sure.
Okay. So it
I
sounds
think
like you just
about it.
found dudes cute and things like that. And then were
Yeah.
there okay, yeah, I'm not gonna while I think it could be helpful, if it's okay with you, we'll not ask you anything else about pornography or what you find attractive.
It doesn't really matter to me.
Okay, so then let me ask you this. I mean, were there particular people that you sort of, it's not just physical attraction, right? So was there like sort of a romantic, did you like crush really hard on particular people or fall in love or anything like that? Middle school, high school?
I did with book characters
Interesting.
in like fictional books. I don't, I didn't really have any like guys I was like interested in until like early mid college. Because something that actually helped me a lot was I used to be a competitive Smash Brothers player for 4 years in college,
Hmm.
and like 90% of Smash players are gay in some way. So
Really?
it's kind of an exaggeration, but there's definitely a lot of gay people in the competitive Smash scene, and so I just met a lot of people during that, and that kind of helped me get things going, if that makes sense.
Sure. And can you tell us a little bit about what getting things going looks like?
I just finally like found people I could potentially be interested in, whether I was or not. Because like, if you're like identify as a male and you like males, and you like go out in public, you can't really like look at people and think like, oh, I kind of like them because they're like more likely than not going to be interested in you.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have like your own internal checklist of like people that could be potential like partners. And I'd never really had any until I went to the scene and realized, oh, there's a lot of people I could, whether I want to or not, there's still like an option I could put on this list. And then
Yeah.
yeah, and then as it grows, you find one that you're like, oh, I think I'll act on this one.
Okay. So it sounds like, being around other people who were almost like more openly non-heterosexual, or that you could have romantic relationships with, like, that they would conceivably be interested in you. That really helped you kind of like, I don't know, I guess cultivate or let those feelings out some.
I think it also helped that not really anyone there was religious, and I'd been in an extremely religious household, and I still hadn't really internalized to myself that it was okay to like men. And so seeing all them like date each other and all this kind of stuff, it's kind of like, oh, this is like a normal thing. They're normal people. It's not as big of a deal as I thought it was. It kind of encouraged me to act on it.
And I'd love to hear actually a little bit about that. What was it like to grow up religious and like think it was not okay to like men?
It might take me a minute to remember, but it was kind of just like I didn't necessarily think there was something wrong with me. It just felt like, oh, this is my challenge. I have to beat it if I want to go to heaven. Like that makes sense. And it was kind of like a.
What was the challenge that you had to beat?
To not like men.
Okay, so you knew you liked men and you thought that was something to overcome.
Yeah.
And how did you come to peace with that?
Just that same Smash story. So like just meeting a bunch of friends that were openly into men or women or the same sex gender. And realizing, oh wait, they're normal people. It's not a big deal. It's not like wrong. Like if that makes sense.
And is it okay if I ask a little bit more about religion?
Sure.
So it sounds like, I'm guessing you identify with one of the Christian or Abrahamic faiths?
I'm Protestant Christianity.
And so what is your understanding of like going, you mentioned you're religious, right? So is it okay if I ask you about your specific religious beliefs and how you kind of tie those things together with your sexuality and gender identity?
Yeah, although I do think it'd be better to clarify, I'm more spiritual than religious. I'm not like a live by the Bible, go to church, but I do, like I'm spiritual.
Yeah, sure. So actually that clarification is exactly what I'd like to understand, if that's okay.
Perfect.
So, I mean, help me understand what do you think about God, heaven, spirituality, life, being gay? Like, how do those two things intersect for you?
Sure. So the God I was taught to believe in is like loving and perfect and whatever. And I think if the way I put it to myself is if gay is one of the worst things you can be in God's eyes, and that's the one thing I do wrong, I'm already better than 90% of people that do all these horrible things. Or like one thing I've talked about with a bunch of therapists is that God never, or I guess Jesus never disliked anybody. He never hated anybody. Even as he was being crucified, he said, God forgive them. I think there's a lot of people, like famous bad people, that probably would still even be in heaven, if that makes sense. Just because the God I was taught, I think would have a hard time sending anyone to hell, really, because if he's so loving, I don't see why he would do that.
That's a really interesting take. I think one of the most interesting things about religion, and I think this is true of any religion, is that it's interesting how easy it is to deviate from some of the precepts of what the actual like religious figures were saying, right? Like Jesus really wasn't sending anyone to hell, and just like you said, quite the opposite. He was like, forgive them, for they know not what they do, right?
Like I don't get why there's so many modern Christians that I know in my life that are like, you're a horrible person, get out of my church, Jesus hates you. Like, have you read the Bible? Like, I don't think they know what they're talking about.
And how do you understand those people, and how do you deal with them?
I just ignore them.
And do you have a sense of what's going on in their head?
I mean, I understand where they're coming from. I definitely don't agree with it, but it's kind of their own thing. It's not really up to me. It's their battle. They need to figure out.
And can you help us understand where they're coming from, or what you understand about that?
Uh, well, because I was kind of the same way. Because I was raised where in church they say, these gay people are horrible. They're going to hell. They're infecting all of our youth. Blah 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 blah. And when you're raised being told that, you're kind of like, oh, I guess it has to be true then. Because that's just what every important person in your life. Because my family's all like great people. All like I liked my original pastor as a kid. I liked everyone in my church. There's like this one thing. They're like, oh yeah, it's just these people are bad. Like, oh, I guess they are. Okay.
I see. So I'm once again, Misty, hearing a lot of respect from you.
I suppose.
Like in the sense that you're sort of acknowledging that these are not evil people. It's just you recognize that these are the circumstances that they were brought up in. And so they were just taught to believe a particular thing. And I'm not hearing you kind of demonize them for what they believe.
I can agree. Yeah.
I think that's rare.
I do too.
Why do you think it's so rare?
Because I think it's easier just to blame people, and like if someone does something stupid, just call them out on it.
What makes it easier to blame people?
Just in general, like if you're queer in any way, and then a bunch of people come up to you and start like harassing you, I think it's pretty easy to say like, oh, they're just bad people. They just started harassing me for no reason. Or if on the other side, if you're like raised to think these people are horrible, and then you see them quotes being horrible in public, you're like, oh, hey, you're doing bad things in public. You shouldn't do that. Like it's just kind of human nature, I guess.
Sure. How is it that you're able to not blame them?
Personally, for me,
Yeah.
probably just a lot of experience. Because again, I've been dealing with this for almost a decade now. I'm sure I used to be like that.
Were you?
Probably. I don't really remember.
It sounds like your family is good Christians.
Yeah, I like them.
Like I'm noticing that like respect and love and forgiveness was something that you were really raised with.
I think so, yeah.
And it's so interesting, right? Because I sometimes wonder about kind of the fire and brimstone households, and even so one thing that's kind of confusing for a lot of people or meme worthy for a lot of people is that a lot of human beings who are very, very anti-gay or anti-LGBTQIA are actually engaging in homosexual activity themselves.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
And so it's really interesting, but there's a fascinating psychological theory of like reaction formation, which is like, so what happens with these people is they grow up, right? They have these internal feelings like, hey, I have a penis fetish. And then when you're 16 or 17 and you've got a penis fetish and you ask your friends in the car, much like you did, like, hey, do any of y'all sometimes have a penis fetish? And everyone's like, no. And so you're taught to hate homosexuality.
I get that.
What happens is as you're taught to hate that, you start to hate a part of yourself. And there's a very simple psychological mechanism called reaction formation, which is that we demonize in other people the things that we hate about ourselves. And so if I can like hate this other person a ton, I can kind of redirect that from myself and I become okay on the inside. Because if it's unacceptable for me to be gay, but I pile enough people, that sort of like eliminates the gayness within me. It's kind of weird, but I've had some experience with this, but there's people who know a lot more about it than I do who've kind of explained that. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I've seen that before.
Because I think it's very interesting how just, there's people who are very, very anti-LGBTQIA or anti-queer who are oftentimes engaging in queer kind of stuff. But anyway, and so anything that I know I've been kind of a little bit all over the place. Is there anything that I've asked about or that we've talked about that you wanted to share more about? Otherwise, I've got questions.
Not that I can recall, no.
Okay. Can you tell us? So you've shared a lot about your androsexual nature and what that experience is like, and thank you so
Mhm.
much for doing that. Can you
Of
tell
course.
us a little bit more about the demigirl aspect and how you sort of discovered that?
Yeah, sure. So I've never felt like the male genders perfectly fit me. I also don't think the female gender perfectly fits me either, so that's why you go non-binary. But I do kind of like more on the feminine side that does make more sense to me. Where I have talked to my mom in the past about, hey, just so you know, I think I've might be transgender. I decided against it, but still just kind of in that like middle ground. So, just like I have she is one of my pronouns, along with they is non-binary. I do a lot of feminine things like my nails and stuff, which most of gender and gender expression is solely based around conception and expression, if that makes sense. I think I said expression in both terms, but you get what I mean.
No,
And
can you please explain that?
yeah, sure. So like in like the United States, wearing a skirt is like an extremely like feminine thing. Like only people like female feminine genders do that. Whereas like if you look at like kilts in Scotland, that could be like more of a masculine thing. Like it really depends on like your surroundings and what you are as to what your gender expression is. It's like again, I've said painting my nails is like a feminine thing. Only here, like there's many places in the world painting your nails is like just like a gender neutral thing. It really depends on like the stuff around you, I think.
Okay, so I understand how it relates to expression. Can you help us understand what you mean by conception?
In which ways?
So, like you said, that gender identity relates to conception and expression. So, how do you conceive of yourself?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just kind of more of like what feels best to you internally and like how you want people to react to you, if that makes sense. So like if you want someone to like call you specific pronouns, that could be a sign of gender identity. You don't have like again, there's people that are completely like cis, heterosexual, normal in quotes that still use different pronouns, but they're very like plain. Like having pronouns it doesn't necessarily mean your gender's change, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But
And so you
yeah.
said that you didn't really identify fully as masculine or feminine. Can you help me understand what the like how does that work? Like what do you feel? What do you notice? What do you think? How does one know that they don't identify? Like what did that
Hmm.
look like for you?
I think it's just solely based on um like just the typical what's the word? Like I guess stereotypes for males and females. So like males are usually like big, muscly, like get dirty, like trucks or whatever. At least where I'm from, and that's definitely not me. And then girls are like love pretty dresses, love princess movies, get manicures and pedicures. That's a little closer to me, but not. It's also not me. So that's why I think I'm a little more on that side, which is where that's why I say demigirl, not just non-binary.
Mm.
But as a blanket term, non-binary just means any gender that's not 100% male or 100% female for chat.
And so what was it like growing up for you? Like how did you know that you were not how did you know you were non-binary?
Um, it's just kind of again kind of like a choice. Like you can express however you want and still be like a cisgender. Like you can be a
Mm.
full male who likes princess movies and Barbies. Like that's just how you can be. It's just kind of a choice if you want to identify with it or not. I don't think it necessarily means like, oh, if you do this, you have to be this person.
I'm with you. What I'm kind of curious about is like internally, what were you feeling or thinking like when you were a boy or like a kid, right?
Hmm.
Did you think of yourself as a boy?
Yeah, I did.
And when did that start to change?
Um, Probably just the past few years, honestly. It's kind of new.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear about what that journey was like if you can articulate it. I realize it may be hard or impossible, but
Yeah, it's there's so many terms and they're still new to me as well. It's kind of hard to work around them, but I think Well, as a kid, I didn't even know other genders existed. That's not something we ever
Right.
were taught, which is why I think there's been such a big boom in it recently. Is with the internet, kids are learning more and more at younger ages, like, oh, this is something you can be, and then maybe that fits with them. But for me, as I kind of started learning it, I met a couple non-binary friends, kind of like learned how stuff worked, and eventually realized like I think this suits me more than anything else, and I would be comfortable identifying with this, if that
And,
makes sense.
and what are the features that kind of suit you or that feel more comfortable or appropriate?
I'm not really too sure, honestly. It's
Okay.
just kind of like a go by feeling.
Okay.
So, like, there's a lot of like online identity tests you can take, and it'll be like, oh, you might be this percent this thing, and then sometimes you're like, you know what, that kind of feels right, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Okay. So internet tests told you so.
Yeah, kind of.
No, but I mean, I can see how they can be useful at sort of helping you explore certain ideas or give you kind of a framework to think about things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I
I'm
do
sorry
want
if I'm not articulating it myself the best. It's not something I had to think through before. If that makes
no, that's totally cool. I mean, I think that, as you mentioned, I think you have a lot more experience, or maybe that's not the right word, but you've had a lot more time to sort through and navigate being androsexual than you have being a demigirl. And so
Yes, I
I'm
agree.
sort of hearing that it's still kind of like a work in progress for you.
Yes, I can agree with that.
Yeah, so I think that makes sense, and you know, you don't have to give us perfect answers to everything. It's even the androsexual part has been so helpful and so enlightening.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
I know at the beginning you mentioned a lot of stuff about harassment and swatting and in using an avatar. Are you interested in kind of talking more about that, or I have some other like questions for you more about like general things like gender identity related stuff. I'm curious, like, what you think about things like conversion therapy. What do you think would be a better use of our time?
Whatever you think would be more helpful to people, I'm fully down for.
So let's start with like, you know, what's it like being a queer person in life and on the internet?
Um, in life, I feel like it's not really a big deal in my experience.
Okay.
Like, I feel like one of the big things online is that no one has a face. Everyone can hide behind a mask and do whatever they want. Whereas in person, it's a lot more difficult for someone to like walk up and harass you. I mean, they definitely still do it, but I feel like it's a lot more frequent online because it's easier for them to do it.
Okay.
Um, so like you can get a lot of hate comments or like people trying to like mock you or whatever, and it's pretty easy just to like mute them. So like on my YouTube channel, I have a list of like 3,000 words that insta block your comment if you like say them, that kind of stuff.
Is there, can you give us example of those words without violating TOS?
Just like common slurs and stuff. Like if you
Okay.
just Google like I
Because
forget what they
3,000 is a
call it.
lot.
Yeah, there's I just Googled a bunch of lists people make for like common blocked words and just kind of compiled them all into one
Got
bigger
it.
list. If that makes sense.
That sounds like a really useful resource.
Yeah.
And so what's it like being kind of harassed on the internet?
Again, I kind of just ignore it because I mean, what can I really do? If you try to talk back to someone that's harassing you, it's only gonna make it worse, like 9 times out of 10, maybe even 10 times out of 10. But if you just ignore them, they're clearly just looking for attention or to make some kind of reaction. So if you don't give that to them, it kind of just blows over, in my experience at least.
Okay. Does it hurt you when they say things like that?
Sometimes it can, but it's never like a big deal. Like I don't think it could ever like ruin my day or something. But it'd be like, oh well, that kind of sucks. Anyways, goodbye. And then I like remove them from my thing.
Misty, you seem very grounded.
Perhaps.
Because I mean, I've worked with a lot of content creators. I mean, usually, you know, stuff gets under our skin pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
How? That's so interesting. I wonder if it kind of goes back to the way that you like just respect people. So do you have a sense of like where that hatred is coming from for them?
I assume it's the same thing I talked about with religion, is that people just don't know. There's a natural human fear of the unknown. If you see something that's weird to you, you're gonna make fun of it. Like nerdy kids in school typically get bullied the most because they're different than the others. Like, I think people just like to kind of like what you said, how if maybe they have a fear of themselves, where like maybe they thought a guy was cute once and now they want to beat you up because they're mad at themselves. Like, you never really know someone's story, so if they do something stupid, I'm just gonna hide them from my thing so I won't see them again. Something I
That
actually learned you can do on Twitter is I can only see notifications from people that do follow me, which gets rid of like 90% of the harassment.
interesting. Okay. I'm just wondering whether, how common it is for people who harass queer personalities on the internet. How many of them just secretly have penis fetishes and are dudes?
I think a very large margin. Something my counselor brought up is that there was, I don't remember what study it was, I couldn't link it to you, but they said like the vast majority of the population is like bisexual in some percentage, whether even if it's just 90-10, they'll just never admit it, which I don't know how they tested that, but it kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah, so there's some that's that report that statistic. I don't know more recent stuff, but there was a very famous sex researcher in the 60s named Kinsey. And so Kinsey was one of the first people. I don't even remember if it was a man or a woman, but they released these things called the Kinsey reports, which is really like a very, very like qualitatively rich exploration into human sexuality. And what they basically did is like asked people, like, this was early on when people were just basically asking like, what are you attracted to and stuff like that. And so I think the Kinsey reports are basically where that idea comes from, that 90% of people are homosexual. I mean, not 90% of people are not 100% heterosexual.
Yeah, that sounds familiar too. I think that's the right one.
I think, though, that more rigorous and later research kind of shrinks that percentage down. My guess is that well over 50% of people are probably squarely in the heterosexual category. There may be some lingering stuff there, but I think based on some of the studies that I sort of encounter and think have better methodology, we're talking about 10 to 20% of the population is probably not cisgender and not heterosexual.
Yeah, but even still, that's a large percentage.
It's a huge percent. And then the other thing is that seems to be growing. So even this sort of idea that 10% of people are queer in some way, that could have another, the number is probably even higher. So one of the things that we're seeing is that there's been a 5-fold increase in the diagnosis of autism within the last 20 years. Now, this doesn't mean that people are 5 times as autistic today as they were 20 years ago, although I'm sure there's a 4chan joke somewhere in there. What it really is that now that we're aware of stuff and we're looking for stuff and we're able to pick it up, we are getting closer to the true number out there. So I suspect that's what's going on with people being queer. And then the other kind of the other kind of interesting thing is that since the number is on the rise, this is why I think that a lot of people are like, oh my God, Misty is infecting people with the queer virus and is turning people queer.
They caught me.
And I think it's just the same reason that autism isn't infectious. It's just our increased awareness and space for this kind of stuff causes an increase in diagnosis. The increase in diagnosis doesn't mean that the actual condition is increasing. That just means we're detecting it more faithfully.
Yeah, and I think also something that helped was pretty much everything's defined as a spectrum now. Whereas I feel like even however many years ago, a lot of stuff was binary. So it's like you're straight or gay. There's no in between. And now there's a lot of in between things, and people are like, "Oh, I think I actually am maybe in between or something."
Yeah,
and that causes more people to identify with him.
Kind of makes sense. The more questions that you turn from true false into like essay, the more variability you're going to get in the answer. Yeah. So Misty, well, let me just think for a second. I had a couple other questions. I had something that I wanted to ask you, but I just blanked. Oh yeah. So do you have any thoughts about gender dysphoria and the relationship between gender dysphoria and being queer?
I get what you mean. I'm not sure I'd be the best person to talk with that
Sure.
because I'm still working through that myself. But I do think that is something that needs talked about.
Okay, that's fair enough. It was
Yeah,
just
I'm not sure how much I could help with them.
No, that's totally cool because I'm not hearing that that you experienced a whole lot of dysphoria.
Kind of depends on the situation.
Can you help us understand that a little bit?
Let me think for a second. Okay, well, I am still working through it. How about maybe in the future I can come back and give you a better answer?
Absolutely. This is where I think you've already shared so much. I was just curious because I think something that even I struggle to understand is, so we know that there's, for example, a diagnosis for gender identity disorder, which is primarily characterized by dysphoria. And there's, a lot of emerging research, so I don't know that we have 100% clear answers yet, that generally speaking, people who are queer are more prone to things like suicidal thoughts and even completed suicide. And there are some studies that show that gender affirming care is beneficial to people, but I think the research is still being done and we're not 100% sure, and it depends on the methodology of the study. The stuff is relatively new. And I was just really curious if you had personal experiences of that you could share that could help us understand from, an individual perspective as opposed to a research perspective. But I totally get that that's not something that you've dealt a whole lot with or don't really have a whole lot, that hasn't been your experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally
but,
cool.
I could say probably that I do obviously know a lot of queer people or like trans people or people that have had gender dysphoria in any way. And I'm not saying this is true for every case, but from what I've heard from all of them is that all of the self-harm and suicides that have happened have been related towards the bullying and harassment and not necessarily their own gender identity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's because of the way that they're treated instead of who they are or the way they feel.
From what I understand, from what people have told me.
Sure. So I get that that's anecdotal, and I appreciate you kind of adding that caveat. But that's
of course
useful, and I think one day we'd like to talk to someone like that. And so growing up, I've been thinking about conversion therapy kind of in the back of my mind, simply because you grew up in kind of a Protestant, situation. Was that something that was prevalent or anything that you kind of dealt with or saw or anything like that?
I mean, I've definitely heard like pray the gay away, but I've never like been sat in the electric chair thing or whatever the stereotype is for conversion therapy.
And can you help us understand how pray the gay away is supposed to work?
Again, like I said before, I like thought that when I was younger and Christian, I needed to not be gay. It was a challenge I had to overcome. And so I thought just like enough like prayer and time and stuff would get rid of that. Of course it didn't. That's not really how that works. But
So it sounds like you tried to pray the gay away.
Yes, I did.
And can you tell us what that looked like?
I mean, just like your daily prayers, like, please fix me, please get rid of this, whatever. You consider it something wrong in yourself.
Sure.
Kind of like a disease, like heal me, whatever.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually very helpful, Misty. Thank you. Because I think a lot of times people, because I imagine there are people out there who are going to be doing that every day, where they pray to God or pray to Jesus or pray to whoever their God of choice is to fix them, heal them, make them different.
Yeah, I agree.
Please take the penis fetish out of my mind. So
maybe I might start saying that instead of androsexual. Say, I just have a penis fetish.
Yeah, I'm sorry I keep bringing it up. It's just
no, it's funny.
Like, it's got to be one of the biggest cases of mental gymnastics that I've ever seen. It's like, wow, that's some real interesting cognitive, distortions there or bendiness. But cool. I mean, do you want to talk about harassment and being misgendered, swatting?
Sure, we can. Um,
So go for it.
I think misgendering is probably the quickest one.
Okay.
It's definitely hard to get people to do what makes you happy. Like, of course, a big thing with trans people in the media right now, or like Bud Light kind of stuff, that spokesperson, is that everyone wants to like just harass them, let them know you are not who you say you are. You are who we're telling you you are. We're not going to call you your pronouns, etc. So like getting people to try and use that is very difficult, and obviously you can't force everyone to do it, but it's just kind of hard to tell people. So like sometimes my friends will like make a mistake and call me the wrong thing, and it's difficult to like mention like, hey, just so you know, you said this, it'd make me feel better if you said this one instead. And they're usually like, oh, okay, sure, I'm very sorry, I didn't mean to. But there's always some people that are like, yeah, what you gonna do about it? And then that's kind of
Wow.
hard to deal with.
How do you deal with that?
I don't think you really can because, like I said a second ago, you can't really force people to do anything, and like people are always going to do what they feel is right. And if they don't respect your pronouns, they're not going to use them. There's nothing you can do to make them use that. So I would just not talk to that person anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like you're not out there trying to convince people and you're sort of like, I'm really noticing how well you navigate towards some people in life and how quickly you're okay navigating away from other people.
Yeah, I think that's very important for people that get misgendered.
I mean, I
Is
think it's
just
important for everyone. So,
yeah, yeah,
so
true.
I think one of the most underappreciated skills we have is letting go of convincing people that they're wrong.
Hmm.
So much of the mental anguish that I hear from people is like when someone is wrong, people who try to convince them otherwise will spend so much time and wasted effort. And
Yeah.
just letting people believe what they want to believe, whether it's right or wrong, and kind of going about your day is like so good for your mental.
Because even, I guess one of the ways I see it is even if you can prove this person wrong, and like they will have to do what you say, uh, being wrong makes people angry. So even if you can prove them wrong, they're now going to be angry. So no matter what you do, it's a lose-lose situation. So just don't bother.
Yeah. So even if you win, you end up losing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree completely. I think one of the biggest things to remember is that I think we think a lot about convincing people, but I sort of think about it as like help people understand. And if
Hmm.
they're not open minded or willing to understand, then that's on them, right? I'm not going
Yeah.
to spend all the time sort of trying to convince them. And so really think about, is this person willing to be open minded? And if the answer is no, stop wasting your breath.
And then if alternatively they could be going after you, it's not even you doing anything. Like maybe someone like DMs me on Twitter like you are a man, you are a he, blah blah blah. Like they're going out of their way to me. I can just mute them, or in person you can just kind of try to walk away and hopefully nothing gets worse. That's a little more difficult in person. But I think both ways, whether you're trying to tell someone they're misgendering you or they're coming after you, I think you just need to reassess the situation. That makes sense.
Absolutely. So Misty, I'm kind of curious. I've got a question for you. I was hoping for your guidance with something.
Sure.
So we try to have conversations with people and try to understand their like experience of being human and kind of where they're coming from. We try to do that in a relatively non-judgmental manner. I'm not
Hmm.
saying that judgment we sometimes are judgmental, and I think judgment actually has a place, but to be judgmental with compassion.
I get what you mean.
So one of the things that I personally have struggled a lot with is this idea of like platforming someone versus like understanding them. So
Okay.
in my heart of hearts, and also as in my clinical experience as a psychiatrist, it's kind of interesting because when I tell people like, yeah, I worked in a jail for 3 months, everyone's like, wow, like you must be a good human being. And then if we ever like talk about, interviewing someone who has, let's say, very like anti or has a perspective on homosexuality that is like anti or whatever, that people are talking to that person is like off limits. So do you have a sense, and I personally struggle with this because I think that the way that we bring people together is actually through dialogue. Like that's just my personal ethos. I'm not saying that that's objectively correct. And I think that ostracizing or canceling particular people can be very effective. But would you have thoughts about, like, let's say we got the opposite of you.
Okay.
Let's say, how would you feel about us doing an interview with someone like that?
I don't know if I'd say I'd love to, but I think it'd be worth it. Like, I don't think it'd be a fun conversation, but I think it's worth the effort, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, would you? What do you think about the potential harm of platforming someone who could say damaging things?
I think as long as both sides are platformed equally and people can kind of like form their own opinions based on it. Like I feel like if one person saying like, "Hey, I'm a normal person. I like the same gender." That's it. And then someone else like yelling and like spitting out of their mouth like, "You're disgusting. I hate you." I feel like most people would kind of just realize one side might not be as bad as the other. But I guess that's a little bit hopeful. But I
Sure.
think just in general, I do think there's obviously nothing wrong with any queer identities. So I feel like in any argument like that, most people would probably realize like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought it was, because that's what my experience was in Smash. Like I used to think like being gay was like a bad thing and I needed fixed, and then I met all these people that were just normal people, and I was like, oh, it's not what I thought it was. So I think even if you did have someone horribly against it, as long as you also have someone like very for it and they kind of clash, I feel like a lot of people would kind of like understand the issues better rather than just hearing only one side, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, so and that's it's good to hear. Thank you so much for sharing that. Like I think for me, it's not even so much about sides, although I totally get that that's an important aspect because
Yeah.
I don't even really think about it as an argument. I mean, I know that it exists but the way that I
Yeah.
approach it is just like understanding. And I've worked with a lot of people who I think could be described as bigoted or evil or, terrible human beings. And like, that's just part of what we do as medical doctors is like, we try to engage with everyone. And it's part of, the oath that you take when you start med school and the oath that you take when you graduate about sort of like treating people equally. But I'm a little bit concerned about navigating that issue. I'm happy to talk to pretty much anyone about anything, but I think that I've come to understand and realize and appreciate that having a conversation with people can have, in fact, this whole HG thing is about the far-reaching impacts of a single conversation.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Like, if you get someone who's like very against it, and then you make this video, it gets a bunch of views. Now you're just showing all these things this person's saying that could negatively affect people. But sorry, were you about to say something?
No, go ahead.
Um, I definitely think it's still good though to hear their sides, because like, assuming they are just wrong, you can't really just say, "Oh, well, that person's wrong." Like, you kind of need to understand why they're wrong, if that makes sense. So I think as long as you could say like, "Hey, this person said these things. Just wanted to let you know it's not fully true, or this evidence counteracts that, or whatever." I feel like that's fine, I guess. I don't know. I feel like I'm not really a single person in a place to judge how that should work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the problem that I face is that
Yeah.
I am not that person either, so I'm trying to figure it out, right? Because the other thing that's kind of interesting is sometimes we'll like push back on people that we talk to, but it's not my job to. Well, I mean, sometimes I always represent a view actually, but generally speaking, when people come on and they say something that I disagree with, it's not like my place to disagree with them, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I get what you
I'm
mean.
not holding either side of the argument. I have my own biases and views, but we're
It's
really
definitely
just
tough.
yeah. Thank you very much for offering your perspective, though. It certainly helps me, and I get that you're not
glad to hear.
speaking for the queer people, right? You're not like
Yeah.
the president who's been elected to represent them, and that I'm sure there's a whole diversity of opinions there, but it really helps me to understand that and hear that from you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like what I really appreciate everything we've talked about today. That's sort of like everything that I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
Are there other things that you sort of wanted to mention or share?
I think we've got pretty much everything I wanted to get across.
Okay. And how do you feel about our conversation today?
I've enjoyed it. Love spending time with you. Nice to have a little Dr. K in my corner that talks back to me for once.
I'm confused by that. What do you mean by talks back to you?
Because I've watched your videos for a few years, so to have you respond to me is an interesting feeling.
And is there anything that you would have wanted to ask Dr. K that, because I'm here now, so I can respond?
Well, I assume we just did pretty much. Because like I said, I always wish there was like that video that I needed a few years ago. I feel like we've at least started on that.
Yeah. So I get this. So let me ask in a different way, Misty.
Sure.
I feel like so far the conversation that we've had is not for you. It's for everybody who's watching, and it's for me. Mm-hmm. Is there any conversation that you want to have that's more for you?
I mean, we could, though I'm already in the process of working with a specific LGBT counselor. But
yeah, so if it's counseling stuff, I'd say stick with that.
Yeah. I'd definitely be down to come back in the future, though. Maybe if I've learned a little more, had some more experience.
Absolutely. So if there's something that you want to talk about or something that you want to share, like that sounds fantastic.
Awesome.
So just a couple of other thoughts before we wrap up. So first of all, how do I learn how to get good at Smash? Like, do you have any recommendations?
Well, I wouldn't call myself good compared to other players, but just a lot of time. If you want to get good at Smash, find your local scene. Just show up. Someone will teach you something. You'll get better.
Okay, a local scene. Okay, I did not know that those existed, but I imagine they do.
Yeah.
Okay, and any character recommendations for noobs?
I don't play Ultimate. I played Smash 4 and now I play Melee. But typically, if you just like look up what characters are popular and then see how many moves they use, if you find like a popular character that uses only like 3 or 4 good moves, they're probably pretty easy to learn.
Nice. So find people that have an OP move and just be like a one button masher. And
I think that's a good way to get started.
I try to play Bowser, Donkey Kong. Bowser's good character to start.
Heavy's grapplers. I don't know about Ultimate. In Smash 4, they were both pretty good, I think.
Okay. Good to know. And then just to kind of wrap up, what I'd love to do is just share with you kind of what I understood as your process of coming out.
Sure.
And I think what I'll focus on a little bit more is the androsexual side. Mm-hmm. So here's what I'm kind of understanding, okay? So the first thing is that sign number 1 is you had 5 girlfriends before you hit puberty.
I did, yes.
Right? And because that's
you can really even call them that at that age.
I mean, I'm sure that your at the time your fellow bros were jealous that there was this mega Chad Misty. and this dude can get more chicks and he's not even a dude. And so I really do wonder a little bit about like whether it was like whether sort of being impervious to that sexual attraction or romanticism, even at a young age, it actually correlates with being queer in some way. And then sort of what happened is you noticed that like you actually started to identify with like kind of romantic feelings or not, maybe that's a strong word, but you thought that fictional characters that were men were like pretty cute, right? And it's not necessarily that you had to be attracted to someone in real life. And also that part of the challenge kind of for you growing up in real life is that like even if you were attracted to someone, there's a strong possibility that they would not be attracted back. So you kind of like keep that on the DL. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And that one of the ways that you sort of discovered that you were androsexual, and at the time you sounded like you still identified as a man, so were gay, was sort of, even when you were sort of thinking about heterosexual scenarios, so sex between a man and a woman, you sort of identified with the woman.
Correct.
And then you started to kind of notice that, hey, like, I kind of think some guys are cute. And then you kind of told your buddies, was it in high school, that like, hey,
Then, yeah.
you know, isn't it, what exactly did you say? Can you tell us that again?
It was something like, I just kind of mentioned it casually as if everyone had it. And they kind of looked at me confused and were like, what are you talking about?
And what did
And I
you mention
realized,
again? I love the way that you phrased it.
I don't, it was something like, don't you guys ever feel weird, like, when you're, like, attracted to, like, a random guy and they're like, what?
Yeah. And so you kind of dip your toe in the water and then discover, oh, actually, this may not be an experience that's shared.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes to, so once you sort of figured it out, then I think that there was the process of coming out, first of all, was not binary, that there was a lot of like baked in paranoia.
Yeah.
That a lot of the things that you were thinking about doing, you had to be like extra careful. And I love the way that you described being a spy in your own life, right? Like you're some secret agent and no one can know. So you can't use dating apps. You can't do this. You can't let anyone know. And that you sort of eased into it and made it easy for people to sort of like accept you. You kind of like started by an excuse for like every step forward. So you started painting your nails when you were doing a cosplay, and then you kind of kept on doing it. And at the very beginning, you had a acceptable reason, and then it sort of continued.
Yeah, for sure.
It also sounds like you also kind of displayed certain stereotypical characteristics, which felt consistent with who you are. Your voice kind of started to raise. You had flamboyant mannerisms. And what I'm sort of hearing is that you didn't hold that stuff back the way that you used to when you were a spy.
Yeah, well, I did fully do it with friends, but then in family, I definitely like reserve, like show no emotion, like stoic, kind of sit there, and then I just kind of eased into it over time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then it sounds like the process of coming out was also a process in terms of you started with the most important people first, and you wanted them to hear it from you. That you literally practiced your language and worked through some of your emotions with a counselor in your case, but that you sort of like really like practiced what to say and really got centered before you said anything.
Yeah, for sure. And I would like to reiterate, if we are recapping, that I definitely think one of the best things you can do is make sure you do keep respect for them and say, like, I don't want to hurt you, I don't want to offend you, but this is who I am, this is who I've always been, etc., as we've mentioned.
Yeah, I was going to end with that, but I think that's actually the most important thing, and I love that you articulated it that way, which is that, the process of coming out, especially if you've got religious parents and things like that, can be so contentious. And doing your best to preserve respect towards them, I think garners the same in return, right? Because if you come out guns blazing, like they're going to respond very defensively.
I agree.
And I think the last thing to just mention is that, as you mentioned, in a lot of ways, you're really grateful for your family and your experiences. And, people's mileage may vary. Like if other people who are growing up with Protestant Christians or, Southern Baptists or even other religions, whether they be Hindu or Muslim or whatever, that some people may not be so lucky.
I agree, yes.
And so everyone should kind of take it their way. Last thing is that it sounds like really joining a community was a big part of you feeling confident and grounded. And in your case, it was the Smash community, but I guess, as you said, 90% of them are queer.
Yeah.
So I guess that explains maybe why I haven't played Smash up until this point. But hey, I'm starting my journey now.
Yeah, I definitely think joining a community was one of the best things for me in that situation.
Absolutely. So anything else that you want to say before we wrap up for the day, Misty?
I don't think so, but it's been nice talking to you. It's been nice being here. I'm glad I could hopefully help some people, even if it's just a couple.
Yeah.
Hopefully I didn't ruin anyone else's experience, but say something wrong.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I think we're here to listen to people's experiences of life. So thank you very much for sharing yours, and hopefully it's educational or helpful to people who are listening. And good luck to you, Mr. Cat. Enjoy the rest of Pride Month. Anything else? Can you tell us a little bit about where we can find you and what to expect and what kind of content you're going to be doing?
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Mysticat. It's like mystical, but with a T. I do a lot of weird Minecraft stuff. So if you've ever seen like making a circle in Minecraft or etc., I try to make a bunch of weird stuff and push the limits of the game. But I'm Mysticat or Mysticat Live on all platforms. I mostly just do YouTube though. That's about it.
Cool. Thank you very much. And are you going to be anything in particular you're doing for Pride Month, or just kind of just streaming and doing your standard thing?
I did just play the Pride Minecraft Championship.
What was
That's
that?
about it.
How does that work? What is a Minecraft Championship?
So it's a tournament organized by Nox Crew, who've been making Minecraft tournaments for like 11, 12 years now. And they this month specifically a Pride one, so they tried to get a bunch of queer creators in and only have them on the teams.
So, but how do you compete in Minecraft? How do you have a tournament? Isn't it a sandbox game?
Yeah, that's why, is that you can make a bunch of different games of anything. So it's kind of like Fall Guys. Like maybe you have some PvP games, maybe you have some parkour, maybe you have some like weird quirky games, you get some building games, and then you just get points, and then it adds up, and then there's a winner.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so that's really fascinating. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Mr. Cat. I really appreciate it. And
I appreciate you
if you have other stuff you want to share down the road, please let us know.
Of course.
Take care.
All right, you too. Bye.
Okay. So, thoughts, questions? What on earth? Tree punching. Okay. So, I saw there was a comment about HG is woke now. I mean, I don't know that we're woke, but we're not. We're just here to talk to people about their experiences of life. And I'm sure we have a bias, right? Because, like, I'm a human being and, like, I have a brain, and that means that I have a bias. But I don't know if y'all remember, but we did an interview, epic interview, one of my favorite interviews of all time, with Jimmy from Philly, who was a very proud Trump supporter. And this is where, I think Mysticat said, like, as long as you kind of represent both sides of the argument, like, I'm not even really interested in that. But what I really am interested in is helping human beings understand other human beings. And that's what we're about. I'm sure that at times we have beliefs that will align with, like, particular groups, political philosophies, like whatever, like that's going to happen, right? So, for example, we think that science is a good thing, and we think that, like, medical treatment is a good thing. Like, we believe that, right? But there are people out there that don't believe that and that are kind of anti-science, and, like, that's okay. We're actually okay talking to those people too. We absolutely have our own beliefs, but the really core part of what we try to do here at HG is AoE healing. And it's to recognize that human beings out there today are suffering, irrespective of what their political beliefs are, whether they're queer, whether they're straight, like whatever. People are suffering. And what we're really targeted, what we're focused on, is to help alleviate that suffering. And one of the things that I think is really challenging, right, is that, so we talk about how we're woke. Well, we've also, like, interviewed our fair share of incels. And there's tons of incels in our community. And oftentimes woke people are over here and incels are over here. And what it comes down to, we're not pro or anti either of those things. What we're for is, like, human beings. Because the one thing I've learned as a psychiatrist is that working in jails and working with people who are, like, have ankle bracelets, and working with people who are addicts, and working with CEOs, and working with heads of state, and working with, like, all these kinds of people, like, people are just people. And what I think really, like, screws the world is when we stop treating people as people and we start treating them based on some identifiable thing. And I thought Mystic Cat said this really well, that it's easier to blame than it is to understand. So much easier to blame than to understand. Right? So for people who think that we're woke or we're platforming someone, right? So this is also something where it's like, we don't want to just talk to people of a particular belief system, identification, atheist, religious, whatever. We want to talk to everybody. Because I think it's really important. We've seen this in our own community, especially when it comes to gender dynamics, where it's like, the HG community is a place where echo chambers collide. And that's really challenging. It's very choppy waters at times. And our mod team is fantastic. We've like constricted a lot of these dating and gender dynamics posts to Friday, but these are discussions that need to be had. We can't keep separating ourselves on the internet. Like, this is bizarre. We have so much connection, and we're the most isolated we've ever been. Why is that? It's because we don't talk to people. We just don't talk to people. We isolate ourselves. We cancel other people. And I'm not like anti-cancel culture. That's where like anything I say, I'm going to get bucketed, right? So I think if someone is part of cancel culture is just like consequences for actions. It's karma. At the same time, I think just dialogue is like what we're all about. And there may be absolutely situations in which even dialogue is not appropriate. I'm not saying that. But I think that with the way that the internet and human society is evolving today, a little bit more dialogue and a little bit more understanding and a little bit more listening is a step in the right direction. And that's something that I can absolutely get behind. And so I'm grateful to everyone in this community. Even those of y'all that hate other people in the community, I'm grateful to all of y'all for being here and sharing your perspective. But the one thing that I ask of everyone who's here today is that in addition to sharing, please try to listen. Listen to what other people are sharing as well. And recognize that human beings have varied experiences. And I want to share just one really simple story for you. Early on, I was an intern, so fresh out of med school. I was seeing a patient in the emergency room. And they told me that their parent had just passed away. And I said, "I'm so sorry for your loss." And they looked at me like I was Medusa. And they said, "My parent had been physically abusive my entire life. When they passed away a week ago, it was the most relieving thing I've ever experienced." And I was like, holy crap. That never crossed my mind. We assume that all parents are good parents and everyone misses their parents when they die because it's very common, right? But what I learned that day is that everyone's experience of life is different. And just because your life existed a particular way does not mean that other people's lives existed that way. And why do we assume this stuff? Because we don't hear or listen the experiences of other people's lives. And that's what we're here to combat. And we think that bringing the world and the internet together happens through dialogue and listening. And I've seen actually horror stories of people even working with therapists. And the therapist will advocate very hard based on their value system that their patient should repair the relationship with their parents, right? Because you only get one mom and dad, and you'll regret it after you die. But that even therapists, we can impose our own value system on our patients, and that can be a mistake. That's the case of a therapist not listening. And I've been guilty of that. I just shared an example, so it's not like I'm better than any of them. This is what I've learned, is that I've got to be super careful. And I try really hard to recognize that other human beings are different, and I strongly encourage you all to as well. I mean, half the internet is trying to convince the other half of the internet that they're wrong. Right? Why are we losing this game of Dota? This game of Valorant? It's because you're a noob. And what's that person doing? We're losing because you're a noob. And what happens to both of those players? They lose the game, they queue back up, and then they tank another game, which is why they're bronze. Which players climb? The ones that actually listen to other people. Because, hey, if you're in bronze, chances are you're making a mistake. And it's possible that your team members are aware of what mistakes you're making. And this is happening not only in every single game that has matchmaking, right? Which is why people will play 10,000 hours and be hard stuck at bronze. It's happening on the internet as a whole. When instead of trying to understand why someone disagrees with me, I'm going to convince them that I'm right. And to be blunt, like what brought me from failing out of college to like teaching at Harvard Medical School was in trying to learn. Not in assuming that I'm right, but recognizing, hey, where could I be wrong? And the one thing that I got, so the interesting thing is that I got one piece of very positive feedback from my program directors when I was becoming a psychiatrist. And they said that your best strength is that you take feedback well. When people tell you you're doing something wrong, you listen. That was the one thing that I was S tier in. Everything else, TBH chat, I'm kind of like average. There were people who were way smarter, way more hardworking, like people who were like I was bronze tier who somehow got like recalibrated to diamond. But the one thing that I did well is learn from my mistakes. And even when I didn't think I made mistakes, I started to ask myself what I could do better. That was the one thing I was good at, TBH. And that's how you go from like failing to the top, is correcting your mistakes. And what I'm seeing on the internet as a whole with all this woke, anti-woke, whatever, is like no one is stopping to think about like, what can I do better? Everyone's thinking about what everyone else is doing wrong, which is why the whole fucking world is stuck at bronze. We're not getting better. We're moving in the opposite direction. Do y'all get that? Mental illness is in crisis. We're at the highest level of depression, anxiety. Suicide's been pretty stable, actually. It's getting a little bit worse. The number one cause of death for Asian kids in America between the ages of 18 and 24 is suicide. For non-Asian kids, it's accidents. And the most dangerous thing for an Asian kid is themselves. And why is that? It's because their parents teach them to protect themselves from the rest of the world. Right? So they have fewer accidents. But they're a danger to themselves. Why? Because when an Asian kid says, hey, I'm struggling. Hey, life is hard. People don't listen. Neuroscience research is at an all-time high. Translation of neuroscience research. We've got Chads like Sam Harris and Andrew Huberman who are taking so much neuroscience and translating it to the public. We've got so many people like Dr. Romani and Brene Brown and like all these amazing human beings who are sharing so much information. Science is at an all-time high. We're like making breakthroughs with quantum computing. Human society is progressing and mental health is getting worse. Why? Every other dimension of medicine, we are just leveling up. And I want y'all to think about this. You can take a heart out of a human being's body and stick a different one in there. There are even cases of people putting pig hearts into humans and that human staying alive for a while. This is how far science has come. We've got ECMO for your lungs, cardiac bypass for your heart, dialysis for your kidneys. ECMO is extracorporeal membranous oxygenation. We've got a device that can breathe for you, a device that can pump blood through your body, a device that can clean your bloodstream like your kidneys. And mental illness is getting worse. Why? If science is getting better, shouldn't mental illness be getting better? It's because we've stopped listening. We've stopped trying to understand. And the judgment in the world is at an astronomical high. If you're an incel, it's your fault. If you're red pill, you're woke. I mean, you're not woke. You're an ass. If you're woke, you're everything that's destroying everything. Right? It's just judgment. It doesn't matter who you are, you get judged. No one's trying to understand what is your experience of life. In my personal experience of working with people who are quote unquote red pillars, most common thing is trauma. What kind of trauma? Trauma inflicted by a woman. But we never think of it that way. We never stop to listen. And I'm not like pro red pill or anything like that. I just think we should listen to human beings. And that's how you bring people back on the path. And if y'all disagree, I'm here to listen. By all means, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me that, hey, I'm here to listen. I'm sharing with you what I believe. Alyssa's asking, is this guy a doctor? Yeah. Last time I checked. I'm a psychiatrist, for those of y'all that don't know. Yes, someone told me something interesting recently. So when I started streaming 4 years ago, it was like, I was pretty clear. Like, I mentioned a lot that I was a doctor and that I was a psychiatrist. And now apparently, like, we've grown so much that, like, we stopped sharing the lore like a couple years ago, right? Because you stop just, hey, hello, chat. I am Alok. I am Dr. Baby. Look at how cool I am. I know so much. I am so cool. And so we stopped doing that. And now what I understand, someone told me this recently, it's like people just think you're a random guy who's talking about stuff, which is honestly what I am. Right? Like, even doctors are random dudes, or random women, or random non-binary. And by the way, the A, the last time I checked in LGBTQIA, is asexual. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's androgynous. Who knows? That's what I thought it was. Yeah, Dr. K versus Dr. Disrespect. Let's go. I'm down. Dr. Disrespect is a cool dude, I think. I've just seen a couple clips of him. Cool. Okay, so thank you all very much for coming today. We've got a couple of cool YouTube videos coming out. We're doing a lot of new things, FYI. So here's the last thing I want to share with y'all. So I'm going to just give y'all a list of topics that I'm planning on doing stuff about. Okay. So brain rot, potentially penis dysmorphia, some stuff around male mental health, deep dives into somatic illness, eating disorders, PMDD. So the understanding the connections between menstruation, female hormones, and mental health. These are all topics that we're kind of considering. Tinnitus is another one. So if you guys have other topics, you know, a great way that another one that I just saw today from our subreddit was like, is it too late to start? So I'm thinking about, I'm trying to build a video about, or a lecture or something about how to start late in life and catch up. And so that's another one. Oh, I also want to do something about boredom. Super hyped about boredom. So like understanding the science of boredom and how to conquer boredom. So these are topics that we've got. And just like Mysticat kind of said, you know, we have deficiencies in the topics that we cover. And how we decide is based on y'all. And so a lot of people, this is just another aside. So there are also certain things that we've built that are sort of like very carefully packaged and very efficient at covering certain topics. So we actually don't cover a lot of core topics anymore, like depression, anxiety, meditation, and ADHD. We've got YouTube videos and stuff, so y'all can search for that. And I'm not saying we're not going to do it again. But generally speaking, one of the things that we've realized is that, like, rather than making the same video like 10 times in a row, that's why we built things like Dr. K's Guide. So if you guys want like a start to finish sort of exploration of depression, both clinical and non-clinical, and then people may wonder, well, what do you mean by non-clinical depression? Where it's like, yeah. So sometimes when people come into my office and they say, I'm depressed, they're not mentally ill. Their life is lacking something very, very important. And so that's what we're going to help you understand. So sort of the spirituality or the existential approach to depression is also in Dr. K's Guide to Depression, which is not necessarily a treatment approach. There's a lot of stuff about treatment and complementary alternative medicine and medications and pharmacology. So for those 4 topics, for meditation, ADHD, anxiety, and depression, what I try to do is mimic when someone comes to my office and says, Dr. K, I want to learn how to meditate. What are all the things that I teach that person? When someone comes into my office and says, Dr. K, I have ADHD, or I think I have ADHD, how do I work with that person? Because a lot of it is going to be clinical understanding, but then a lot of what I do with people who I'm helping is understanding how can you get organized? Where does motivation come from? So the ADHD guide is also our guide to doing stuff. So how can we translate everything that I know from like yoga and meditation and studying in ashrams in India and South Korea and Japan for like 7 years, and everything that I learned at places like Harvard Medical School put together, and we will teach you how to do stuff. And so if y'all are interested in a lot of that and you're looking for more, something that's like more comprehensive and applicable instead of a one-off, definitely check those out. And for the rest of the stuff, this is what we've got on deck. And y'all let us know if you want us to cover something else. Yeah, so female hormones in the menstrual cycle is like a big thing that we're going to do. Okay? Any chance y'all will cover asexuality? Absolutely. It's just an issue of sequencing. Dr. K, please do one on routines, organization, discipline, and whether it's overrated. So that's sprinkled throughout a lot of stuff. We also have resource packs, which I'm not sure if y'all are aware of. Those are kind of like collections of videos with worksheets and exercises. And then a lot of the stuff that you're talking about routine, organization, and discipline, that's in the guide to doing stuff. So just so y'all know, the guide to doing stuff is like 50% bigger than any of the other guides because we go into so many like high yield topics about motivation and organization. How to cry. Good. Thank you, Burpus. Okay. Oh, I got a $130 donation. Thank you so much, Hugo. Thanks for all your work. Have you covered oversleeping? I'm tired all the time and sleep around noon every other day. Sleep. So we have videos on insomnia, but we can absolutely do a deep dive into sleep. Loris is saying, can you do something about bullying? We have videos on bullying, but we also have something in the works around scapegoating. So a lot of bullying actually has to do with scapegoating. Okay? The resource packs are free. The guides are not. And just a reminder, just about in general. So first of all, we try to make as much stuff as accessible as possible. There was a post recently where someone was like, wait, Dr. K's guide isn't a subscription? It's like, yeah, we're one of the few dumbasses on the internet who like doesn't do subscriptions yet, right? Like because we try to make it accessible. Second thing is it helps us a lot if y'all donate, if you guys share stuff, like if you share our videos, if you watch our videos, if you like, if you comment, all that kind of stuff helps us. So even if y'all are not in a place to financially support us, anything that y'all do in that vein, whether it's subscribing or sharing or whatever, like that all actually helps in some way. And then for some of our things that come at a price, like we're very, very grateful to everyone who has bought things like Dr. K's guide or signed up for coaching. Because all of that capital, we've never taken an outside investment or anything like that. And the reason is because y'all support us. And as long as y'all keep on supporting us, whether it's donations, subscribing, sharing, or trying out Dr. K's guide or whatever, like we build it to help you, and then we take that money and then we use it to build additional stuff. So we took the proceeds from the first 3 guides and used it to build a 4th guide, and used it to do things like we have researchers, for example, that will help me with research so that I can produce more high quality videos quicker. And so we're grateful for anything that y'all can provide, and no big deal if y'all are not in a good financial situation. We're still here for y'all, and we're going to do our best. That's also where a lot of people need to remember that we've got an awesome Discord. And the Discord, by the way, has like grown immensely. So even for a lot of these things like accountability, there's like a fitness Discord. And the cool thing about the fitness part of the Discord is that the people there are like people from our community. So the fitness leads on our Discord are very aware of psychological challenges to getting fit. And so they really, really help people. They meet people where they're at, and they really help them, because a lot of fitness is not just about physical routine, right? Which there's tons of videos, and you can see like blog posts about like work out this way and do this kind of thing. And like, wiggle your right toe when you're doing push-ups. And if you wiggle your right toe, it'll contract this muscle and increase your fat burn, and take this supplement. There's all that kind of crap out there. But what I really appreciate about the people on our Discord is whether it's entrepreneurship or fitness, they recognize that the mental struggle is real, and they'll try to help y'all with that. Appreciate all you do and give heart. Any advice videos for healthy parenting as a gamer? So it's funny you should ask. This is what I will say. We are actually going to start a whole YouTube channel, I hope, fingers crossed, on parenting. So stay tuned to that. We just revamped our course about how to raise parenting for like video game addiction and like how to be an effective parent. This is something that I sort of have a lot of personal experience with. So we combine a lot of science with my own experiences of upbringing of parents who loved me a lot, but like didn't know how to teach me discipline, as well as my own experiences of having 2 kids. So absolutely. And we have a Facebook group for parents as well, which, plus minus. Yeah. So that's the other thing. It's like, what our biggest problem is we do a lot of stuff that no one has any clue about. So that's why we strongly so chat, we need y'all's help. We are doing cool things and no one knows. I literally met with our whole mod team yesterday, and they're like, no one knows about all the cool crap we're doing. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to help with that. So if you guys discover something cool that we are doing, please let other people know. Because this whole operation is like not Dr. K, okay? I may have the information, but we need y'all's help in like disseminating it and sharing it with other people. And huge shout out to everyone on our subreddit and Discord and all these other places where someone will ask a question. Hey, I have this problem. And someone else will be like, hey, have you seen this video? Huge shout out to y'all. Y'all are doing God's work. Ronaldo is saying, do you have anything related to dating trauma wounded people? Yes. We have a whole video about how to date someone with BPD. We also have a trauma deep dive, both of which I would recommend you watch. Yes, we have those things. People tell us that, so some people say that the trauma video in particular is like one of the best things that we've ever produced. It's also one of the lectures that I feel the most proud of. I think it's one of the top 3 lectures that I've given ever since I started streaming. And there have been hundreds. The BPD one I made because I love people with BPD. And I love working with them. And they get a bad rap. People with trauma get so demonized on the internet and in our media. And everyone's like, oh my God, this person has a personality disorder, is a narcissist, has BPD, has a history of trauma. Should I break up with them? And no one ever tells us how to successfully have a relationship with those people. Which is sad because they're good people, right? They just, the way that they relate to other people, what they've been taught about what a healthy relationship is or how a relationship is supposed to work is so screwed up, but that's not their fault. That's because of the way that they were raised. And they deserve love and good relationships just as much as any of the rest of us. Have you heard of 48 Laws of Power? Yeah, it's a great book. I think it's not quite as applicable, but it's fun to read. Can someone make a list of all the cool things this channel does? I wasn't listening the last 5 minutes. We'll try. Oh, yeah. Avoidant personality disorder, shyness, social anxiety. That's another deep dive we're looking into. It's on our list. Here's why trauma is so common. Absolutely. That's our core trauma video. Ooh, libido incompatibilities. Love it. What I would love to do about that is not just a video about it, but that's something where I think an interview would be dope. Let's talk to both partners about libido incompatibility. Okay. Is it possible to get people to listen better and be more understanding? Yeah. So you guys should watch our communication webinar. The parents in our community say that it's been absolutely eye-opening. It is one of the most scuffed videos that we have ever produced. This was back before we were cool. And this is when, like, Dr. K ordered a $30 camera from Amazon, was streaming from a laptop during the pandemic in an empty room when I was staying at someone else's house. I had a foldable picnic table, a camera, and a Yeti mic. And we did arguably, some people say, also one of our like top 3 lectures, which is so scuffed, but apparently is the best. People have said that it's like revolutionary for helping them communicate. It's also one, but the problem with that video is that like 30% of people who watch it have no idea what I'm saying. So the big irony is it is a poorly communicated video on communication, where if you get it, it's revolutionary. But like a third of people, I just do such a bad job at teaching that they don't understand what I'm saying. Highly sensitive people. We have a video on rejection sensitivity. We did that already. Goated video, my girlfriend, it. Okay. Are you talking about our communication video or the sexual libido? Anything on gut bacteria, ton of stuff on gut bacteria and microbiome in the guides. But more stuff on gut bacteria coming. It's gut bacteria is sprinkled out throughout stuff. Yes. What video is it? It's Psychiatrist's Guide to Conversation, Healthy Gamer webinar number 7. I think so. That sounds right. Oh, Is There a Thing as an Old Soul? What a great video. That's also interview. Autism, tons of videos on autism. Tons of videos on autism. Check that out. Healthy or unhealthy approaches to fitness. I'm with you. More LGBTQ videos or interviews? Sure, let's do it. Communication webinar remaster when? When y'all are willing to pay for it. We can't go remaking videos because we got all this other crap to make unless we get something out of it, bluntly. Right? So we'll work on it. I'll add it to the list. Chat, I woke up at like 4 o'clock this morning. I've been working 14 hours every day this week. I'm getting crushed by this job. But hey, how's the Titan Challenge? This is sad. I actually missed 2 or 3 days of Titan Challenge. So I dropped short, but that's because I've been working like a crazy person. But maladaptive trade? Yes, we have a video about okay, chat. There is this company called Google. Google is really good at searching things. Google has this companion website called YouTube. We have this thing called a channel on YouTube that houses all of our content. And I strongly recommend that you do. We've been doing this shit for 4 years now, and we have over 800 videos on YouTube. Use the search function. Please. Please. Okay? I love y'all, but use the search function. Yes, we have a video literally on maladaptive daydreaming and ADHD. It's literally what the video... It's not just maladaptive daydreaming. It's maladaptive daydreaming and ADHD. We've done it before. Revolutionary for like the 1% of the population that deals with that crap. Y'all aren't getting schooled. I'm asking for your help. Because here's the choice that I have. I can stay here and stream for another 30 minutes and answer y'all's questions about whether we have something. Or I can spend that 30 minutes making something new. You still didn't make the cooking stream. You were right, Barbara Jagoda. You were right. That is something that I owe you and is an incomplete karma, and we're going to make good on it. Depersonalization, derealization, Breedor. Check out the Trauma Core video. It's all about dissociation. Dissociation is the core thing. Decreased activity across the corpus callosum is responsible for so many things in trauma. The core part, and it's dissociation at its root. Good luck, y'all. Have a good weekend. Thank you for all your support. Sorry if I'm being an ass. Seriously, I'm sorry. I've had a long week, and I should be more compassionate towards people who are... Y'all are looking for resources for help, and that's actually what we're here for, and I should not treat y'all so facetiously. That's my mistake. And so hopefully you will forgive me, and I will try to do better, and we're going to try to do better, and we're going to try to do more. I think we have videos on how to build positive thoughts. That could be in the ADHD guide or the meditation guide. One of those two. I need to make a video on how to make tea. Okay. Take care, y'all. I'm going to try to learn from my mistakes, and I encourage y'all to do the same. And we were going to try to help you learn from your mistakes and hopefully build the life that's worth living. Love y'all. We're going to be at VidCon next week, so probably no stream. We're doing a couple of sessions there, but we should still have YouTube uploads and a lot of cool stuff coming out. I'm super excited about this next batch of YouTube uploads that we're going to be doing. Thank y'all so much. Teacher abuse, I saw that. XQC3 podcast. I will look into it. Diet stuff, a lot of that is in the guide and scattered throughout our YouTube channel, okay?